This is Justice Voices, stories that need to be told, voices that need to be heard. Welcome to the Justice Voices program. For the benefit of those who may be joining us for the first time, one of the purposes of this program is to give people like me who have not experienced going to prison, being in prison, and reentering community life after release from prison, the opportunity to get a window into what those things are like by hearing the stories of those who have lived those experiences, or whose lives have been impacted as victims of crime, or, as is often the case, both. Our guest today, Jennifer Stevens, is among those who have experienced both. Jennifer, welcome to our program.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate that.
Please introduce yourself and tell us a little about who you are today and what you're doing now. And I'm going to add, for the benefit of those who are listening to the audio version of this program, those of us who can see you get a bit of a clue about what you're doing now from the clerical collar you're wearing. So
Yes.
please tell us a bit about yourself.
Absolutely. Like you said, my name is Jennifer Stevens. I am now currently what's called a local licensed pastor with the United Methodist Church. I'm in the ordination process to become an elder in the United Methodist Church, which is a many-year process. I graduated from seminary in 2019. I now live here in Chicago. I am the senior pastor of Holy Covenant Church, Holy Covenant United Methodist Church, in the Lakeview East and Lincoln Park neighborhoods of Chicago. I'm also on the board of the Fully Free campaign, and I'm also a coordinator for People's Liberty Project, which we can discuss later if it's of interest, but those are the main things that I am currently doing.
Well, and for anyone who's interested in learning more about the Fully Free program and what it's about, you can go back to, I can't remember the episode number, but we did a couple of interviews with Marlon Chamberlain and with others from the Fully Free program. So we encourage people who are listening to go back and listen to those. Now, let's move back in time.
Okay.
You've gone to prison before, right?
Yes, I have. Yes, multiple times.
And so you have some lived experience that would be instructive to people who are listening who have not had that experience. But also, I think you've had some experiences and learned some lessons along the way that would be helpful to people who have had that experience. Yeah. So let's go back in time and let's talk about what led to you going to prison. Tell us a little bit about your background, your pre-prison background, and then we'll get into the prison experience.
Okay. So it began by, I was married, got divorced. I was a single mom with 2 children. Immediately following that marriage, I entered into a relationship with a man that was 22, 25 years older than I was. He actually was my boss at the time. I had 2 toddlers, and he we were dated for a little while, and within just a few months, he invited me to live with him in a house and provide for me and my daughters. And so I did. I moved in, but pretty fast after that, he became very physically abusive. And with myself only, not with my daughters. And in the attempts of trying to get out of that relationship by calling 911 back then, so this is early 2000s. Back then, there wasn't any programs for individuals who were experiencing domestic violence. There was no support. It was it's a stigma now, but it was even more of a stigma back then. So I would call 911 and ask for help, and he would call them back and tell them I was lying, and no one would show up. So
now,
this
hold
happened.
it. I've got to stop you there and ask. I want to make sure I understand this right.
Mm-hmm.
You, the victim, are
Yes.
calling 911
Yes.
because you're being beaten.
Yes.
And the perpetrator would then call 911 back and say, disregard because it's all a lie. And they
Yes.
would believe that, and the police would never show up without
Yes.
any investigation. Have I got that right?
You got it correct. 100% correct. Um, and during that time, this was pre officers having to go anytime a 911 call was made. So now we have a law in place in most states. I think it's in all states, if I'm correct, that if a 911 call is placed, that the police have to come and check what's going on. But that was not in place at that time.
It seems amazing that you'd have to pass a law to tell the police, or some police. I can't believe that most police or dispatchers would respond that way, but that there would
Yes.
be some, enough, that they would need to pass a law that would require, don't believe the person who is accused of a crime when they say, no, I'm not committing a crime, and therefore fail to investigate.
Yes.
A complaint by a victim.
Yes. Yes.
That's just amazing. But anyway, hopefully we're past those days. I hope.
Yes, it gets worse. So I realized not having any help, there would be times that I would jump in my car to get away from him. And so we would be drinking. Um, and the violence was, it wouldn't be just because he was drinking. It could be just in the middle of the day, him coming home from work and there was a dirty fork on the sink. I mean, it was really that minute. He would check to see if I made phone calls out, like making sure that I was totally excluded from friends and family. He would hit, because back then, he would hit the redial button to see who was my last person that I called. And if I called somebody that he didn't think I should be talking to, then I would be beaten. So it took me several months to get out of this situation. But during that time, I would run. And three of those times that I ran, I got pulled over for speeding and then for DUI. And so one of those occurrences, it was probably the third occurrence, the last one, before I was able to actually really get out. I was running from him. He was driving behind me, chasing me. I get pulled over. The police officer, I have my children in the car. So I was not drinking at this time, but I got pulled over and charged with endangering my daughters because of the high speed I was going. When I got pulled over, I explained to the police officer that this man was chasing me, right? This man had so much arrogance, I guess you would call it, that he actually pulled in front of me and parked and got out of the car and came back to talk to the police officer. And I share with him, see, I'm telling you the truth. He is chasing me. And the officer said, well, but I can't let you get back in the car with those children. I'm going to have to take you in. So he took myself and my daughters to jail, but did not arrest him. Um,
Okay,
so,
now let
yeah,
me interject here. So he was going behind you, right?
yes, he was
He's
behind
chasing
me.
you.
Yes,
Okay, that suggests that you're both going the same speed.
you would think. Yes,
You get stopped.
yes,
He stops himself.
yes.
Yeah, but okay. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So, so I had, and so I was released, and I went back to that house, which was not the smartest in my thoughts, but um, I eventually was able to work out a plan to leave, and called had some phone calls with some friends that were going to come get me, and he started doing some cocaine at that time. So on Friday nights, I knew when he would leave that he would not be back till the next morning. Um, and so as soon as he left, I called. I had told my friend what time they were leaving, and for him to come help me get my stuff. Um, so I was packing up my stuff, getting prepared for a friend to come pick me up. And this guy forgot something. So he actually came back and caught me packing. And so back then we had phones that were the wall phones, right? And You have to turn it off or on, the mobile phone. You have to turn it off or on, right? The home phone. And so I had called 911 and he thought he pushed off, but he actually kept it on. And so the 911 operator actually heard me being beaten. So this time they actually sent the police. And that's how I was able to get out of that relationship. Um, but during one of my DUI hearings, we went all the way with witnesses and did a full hearing. The prosecution called this man as a witness against me for drinking and driving to ask if I had been drinking when I left the house. And so the man that I was running from got to put me in prison for being convicted of drinking and driving with DUI. So that was the
Okay.
first instance of going to prison.
And this being called as a witness was apparently some separate incident from when the police came to your home.
Yes, yes. So it was after I'd gotten out. After I'd gotten out of the house, then I was facing, because I had been arrested 3 times prior to me being able to get out of the house, right? 3 times I ran. Um, well, I ran more than that, but 3 times I got arrested for uh, drinking and driving or endangering. The last one did get thrown out, but the other 2 DUIs are what sent me to prison the first time. Um, So yeah, they called him as a witness against me. The claim that he physically saw me drinking prior to me getting into the car. Um, yeah, so I got convicted
Am,
of that.
am I correct in assuming that was true?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I was drinking, but I was trying. I knew I didn't have police to come protect me, right? So I was just trying to get myself um, from into safety, right, to safety. And so, yeah, I absolutely was drinking,
And apparently,
but yeah,
into the frame of mind to be willing to run.
yeah, yes,
Okay, so in any event, at the end of this trial, you were apparently convicted and you went to prison.
correct, yes. 2 years, I was convicted for 2 years, or sentenced to 2 years. Um, and while I was there, I went to prison angry, extremely angry for being there. Um, and so that experience was different than the experience the second time around. So I went in there angry, didn't believe I should be there, right? So um, no programs to be a part of. And so I came back. When I came out of prison, I came out of prison angry, still angry at what happened. And I would use the terminology that I got tougher, which meant I just stuffed it. And I just was extremely angry, but would stuff it. So it wasn't like just coming out all the time, right? I went 10 years without um, being arrested, never received another DUI. Um, and it wasn't until another trauma occurred that it all came to the surface, and is what led me to prison 10 years later, back to prison 10 years later. So in between that, never saw that person again. Went to college, got a undergraduate degree and Bachelor of Science, Exercise Sports Science. Moved to Southern California. My daughter graduated high school. My younger daughter and went off to college in Hawaii. And my younger daughter decided to, at that time when her sister went off to college, decided that she wanted to go live with her dad because she didn't like living in Santa Monica. And so who wouldn't like living in Santa Monica? But she didn't. So she went to live with her dad, and that left me for the first time by myself. So I was a single mom there since my youngest daughter was 1. And so 18 years later, I now am all alone, right? Just me. So that was kind of the beginning of what I call the spiral downward, not realizing how much that would affect me. Um, that every decision I ever made in my life was surrounded by my daughters. I didn't have my own identity. My identity was Stephanie and Sarah's mom. Everything I did for them. Every job that I got, every vehicle that I purchased, whatever house or neighborhood I lived in, um, was based on their needs. And so when they left, it was this numbing feeling of, what do I do now? Right. And really plummeted into this depression, but not just depression. The individuals that were my friends at the time were individuals who drank a lot. And so I didn't have children around anymore. So what am I going to do when I get off of work? Because I don't want to go sit at the quiet house. That was just too sad. So I went to happy hours. So I was drinking. I wouldn't say it was heavily drinking, but was drinking daily, right? Happy hours, almost. I would say almost every day. Holding a, I was working. I was actually working in clinical research. I was a coordinator for pharmaceutical clinical research, and so wasn't that I was going and taking shots and all that stuff in the evenings, but go out have a couple of beers because I just didn't know what else to do with myself. And so this led to I was at one of the bars on a Sunday watching football with my friends. I'm a Dallas Cowboy fan, and there's a big, huge Dallas Cowboy fan group. And these were pretty much all the people that I was friends with. And so we did lots of things together, but we definitely watched the Cowboys play. And so I was leaving and going to get my into my car from one of the games when the games was finished, um, and I was assaulted. I was attacked in the parking garage, um, pulled inside a car, and sexually assaulted. Um, and I don't remember. I remember waking up to somebody being on top of me and passing back out. So I'm not really sure how I got there. Or really how I got out or how I got away. The next memory I have is being in my apartment, um, getting ready, trying to get ready for work, trying to go to work because this was a Sunday night, so I have to be at work on Monday morning, and trying to get dressed. And somehow I went to work. Uh, I had my own office and closed my door and looked for a rape crisis center. That was this immediate, like, that's what I was like. I was kind of in this numb space. And so I contacted them and they're like, you could come right now. And I was like, no, I have to stay at work. I have to work today because I didn't want to tell anybody. I didn't want them to tell anyone what had happened. And so
And
we finally,
tell us about what that feels like. I mean, why is it that you wouldn't want to tell anyone? You've just been the victim of a sexual assault,
yeah,
a serious crime. You were the victim, but
because
you didn't want to tell anyone. I think it's
I,
important to understand what was going
yeah.
on inside you.
Yeah, it's because I didn't think anybody would believe me. I didn't think anybody would help me. I was afraid of what would be said about me if it was taken to court. Uh, what if my daughters heard? So I always thought. I remember I told you I got tougher. So I felt that I would always be able to protect myself. That there was nothing that anybody could ever do to me ever again that I couldn't protect myself. And the fact that I woke up to this and I could not move. So we don't know what if somehow there was some sort of drug given to me, but I was paralyzed, and that I could not move. I couldn't fight back. And then either I passed out again or my memory is just it's been erased. So I think there was definitely didn't want my children to know because I didn't want them to be worried about their mom. I didn't want my mother to know because I didn't want them to worry. Um, and it took many, many years for me to finally tell them what happened. Um, I don't even know if we really had that really full conversation of all the details. They just know something happened to me. Um, but yeah, it was just, it was from the experience from 10 years prior that um, the police didn't help me, right? That it was always my fault. And I had been drinking, so I was like, oh, they're gonna use that, right? And the fact that I had had DUIs in the past, I've seen what they've done to victims in courtrooms, and so I was like, I didn't want to drag my family through that. So I didn't. When I went to the rape crisis center, they asked me if I wanted to do the kit for if I decided at a later time to press charges. But at this time, I was not going to, but they did do a kit. Um, So that was extremely traumatic. And then the friends that I had were not supportive. And I want to say most of them were males, and I don't know if that's why they weren't able to be supportive, but I kind of got pushed out of the circle. They didn't want me to come to the meetups anymore, to the group, because they were afraid that I might freak out and get upset because it happened after me leaving. And that was one of the excuses. And then they asked, well, are you sure it really happened? Because you were drinking. So, those kind of things. So I didn't really have much
Seriously?
support. No, I'm serious. I'm 100% serious that that's what it was said to me. Are you sure that it really happened? And that because you were drinking, are you sure that they actually uh, assaulted you? Um, so yeah, and
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
You
then
you were drinking, so you just
I
hallucinated.
obviously, yeah, and the rape test shows that I act. There's certain ways that they can tell whether or not that it was forced, and then I had bruising and cuts and things like that too, on my face and on my arms, and then other places where they could tell that it was a forced rape. Um, so yeah, it was obviously traumatic. I had PTSD, extremely bad, extremely bad. I couldn't even go by a garage, a parking garage. And then this individual had stolen my phone too. And somehow, so I went and got a new phone, but the same phone number. And somehow, I guess because he had my phone, was able to see what my phone number was. And this individual actually called me either a week or two. My memory is not so great. A couple weeks later, and acted like as if we had went on a date somewhere. Um, it was really odd, and
Was
so
this
that's
somebody that you knew?
no. It ended up being the valet at this bar for the parking garage. Is who was the person that raped me. That we found out that that's who it was. Um,
How did you find that out?
from the police, we were able. I could remember the name tag. I like certain pieces came back to me about who the person was after he had called, and I heard the voice like. So I still didn't call immediately, but then my children were coming in for Thanksgiving, and my fear was because this person called me a couple times. My fear was that my daughters would be in the city and that he could harm them, and that's when I reported it. That's when I went to the police and said, "This is what happened to me," and I met him at the rape crisis center, and we but by the time they got around, because people were already talking that my so-called friends were already talking, and they actually told the management at the bar that I said that it was one of their um, valets that raped me, and so that person ran. That person ran, and they never arrested him, never found him. Um, and then I ended up being fired from my job because I could not function any longer. And I wouldn't tell my job either, just because I just felt like nobody was going to believe what I said. And so I didn't share, which I should have. And 6 months later, I was fired because I just couldn't function. I mean, the PTSD was so bad, I'd go into my office and just cry uncontrollably. Um,
Okay, so
so,
right
yeah,
right now, as we're talking here,
yeah,
this is Mental Health and Trauma Awareness Month.
yeah,
Okay, you experienced serious trauma on
yeah,
multiple levels by this
yeah,
time,
yeah.
and so far, other than the people at the Rape Crisis Center, you haven't been describing any trauma-informed care
None.
or friends who were apparently so-called friends who were capable of
Right.
anything other than adding to the trauma,
Yes.
adding being anything but friends. You
Yeah.
mentioned some of them were men. Well, my own editorial comment, they may have been males, but that's not the way that men
Yeah.
treat women or have
Right.
attitudes toward women. They should
Yes.
have been, if anything, feeling protective, not blaming you. I
You would
mean,
have
for
thought.
crying out loud. I mean,
Yeah.
in my world, this is just something that it's hard for me to wrap myself around. But I've been a prosecutor long enough to know,
Yeah.
unfortunately, the story you're telling is all too common,
Yeah.
that women experience traumas like this. They're victims of crimes like this.
Yeah.
And then the trauma is compounded by the way people respond to them as victims of the crime, as if they are somehow, what would be the word, part of the problem, or or accountable, or lying, or something like that. And children experience this when they're the
Yeah.
victims of domestic abuse. And so this is a month where it's important for people who are listening to listen up, pay attention, and when somebody reports some traumatizing experience, take it seriously. Assume it is true until proven otherwise, not the other way around.
Right.
Anyway, I'll get off my soapbox. Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. So after getting fired, I decided that, and I just couldn't. I wasn't. I mean, I had high blood pressure from PTSD. Medically, I was doing bad. Um, so I decided to leave the Santa Monica, Los Angeles area. That it would be in my best interest not to. That maybe if I moved, that I would be able to heal. But I still didn't have like. I had from the rape crisis center a person I was talking to, a therapist, and so. But I moved. I decided that I needed to get out of the city and out of the state, and so I went to Texas, and that's where I had went to high school, and most of my life had lived from the age of 12 until adulthood. And so my sister was still in Texas, and I decided that I would get back to Texas, that I would just move to Texas, and everything would be okay. And one of my friends had um, moved there as well. But I started going to church. I joined all the things. I did all the Sunday school classes and was showed up to everything. But then I was also drinking, right? Trying to cover up the pain. I was drinking quite a bit. I was also running. I was training for a marathon at this time too. So trying to do all these different things to help me overcome whatever had happened to me, but not seeking mental health care, right? Just trying to,
Self-medicating with alcohol.
right, alcohol, exercise, and church too, right? Like thinking if I go check off all these boxes and I just show up, that all will be well.
I
But
suspect that exercising and church are not what led to you going to prison again.
nope, they are not. It was the drinking. It was the drinking, the covering up of the trauma. And so, because I had such trauma, if while out drinking, it always seems that things happen in threes to me this time. I just recognize that. The last time I was arrested three times, this time I got arrested three times. Three times within probably a couple months span, in different counties even. So in Texas, all in Central Texas, but in three different counties. I was arrested, always resulting from me being out having a drink. It's somebody approaching me, either touching me, grabbing my arm, or some guy inappropriately touching me. And the rage would come out of where I wasn't able to defend myself that night, that I was assaulted, that I would be damned that I wasn't going to defend myself now. So then the police would get called. And the same thing, I would like jerk away from them. And I would catch that charge, right? I would catch the charge of assault on a police officer. So this happened three times. The first two times, again, I was working in clinical research. I was living in Texas, working in clinical research, making really good money. And so would call my parents and say, can you bail me out and I'll give you the money, or, So two times it happened. On the third time that it happened, that I called my parents and said, don't take me out. I'm not coming. Something's wrong and I need to fix it. And I don't know how to fix it. If I keep just coming back home. And so this was the thought process at the time. Looking back, I know how terribly wrong that was, but only because I'll share more. But so I decided that I would stay in jail and fight my case from in jail, and that I wasn't going to spend any money on an attorney this time, that I was going to get a court-appointed attorney. Big mistake. Um, Big mistake. Because yeah, inside of jail is almost impossible to actually um, get a fair sentence, or even be defended fairly. Because immediately it's wanting to just give you a plea bargain. They don't care whether you did it or not. They don't care the circumstances behind it, or mine did not. So my attorney did not care whether or not. So I had the other two times, right? The other counties, I paid for those attorneys. But this time I said, no, I'm not paying. And I'm just, basically trying to punish myself. I'll just put myself in prison, right? Like I don't need to be outside, and I need to be locked up, right? All the horrible things we tell ourselves, that we're at fault for all these things, right? So I sat in prison for 6 months, going to court on three different charges. But in the state of Texas, they will only have you go to court on your last charge until you get sentenced. Then if you get sentenced, you get sent into prison, and they pull you out to go back to the other ones. They write a writ, you got to go back out. So I was sentenced on, so the one that I had, the court-appointed attorney, wanted me to sign 7 years. I never had a felony before. The DUIs are misdemeanors. So, and it was 10 years prior, 10 years prior. So they wanted me to sign for 7 years. I refused. And one thing about being in prison, you have a lot of people have a lot of law understanding, and shared that I should ask for to be sentenced by the judge, that would be my best bet. This did not come from my attorney. These came from other individuals who were incarcerated at the same time, fighting their own cases.
In other words, you really mean tried by the judge, am I correct?
Yeah,
Rather than by a
correct.
jury?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
right, correct. And so the day that I showed up for to be tried by the judge, then I was given 3 years instead of 7 years. And so that's what I ended up being sentenced to, is the 3 years. And then I was denied parole based on my charges, because assault on a public official, and at that time, individuals, it was at the beginning of this time that, so this was 2013, 2013, and in 2014, in Texas, police officers were under attack, being murdered. Two police officers were sitting in a fast food restaurant, and somebody walked in and just shot them in the head, just for the fact of them being police officers. So even though I didn't have a violent charge, I didn't have, or it was a violent charge, but I didn't have a charge with a weapon, no attempted murder, no murder, right? But I was still treated as if I was. I was locked up with those that had attempted murder and were murderers. I was put on segregation, and I had to be handcuffed everywhere I went.
Now, why was that? Was that because of your behavior in prison?
No, no, I was
Why?
perfect because nobody likes when somebody comes in that has beat up police officers. So I got classified higher than what I probably should have been classified, not because of anything I had done wrong, but because the warden classified me as violent. And even though there's nothing on my record whatsoever that said that I ever committed any violence whatsoever in prison. But I did get finally, after probably again about 6-7 months, I finally got out of not being in segregation and being put in a regular. But it was only because I went out, and when I came back in, I got reclassified. And this time they reclassified me at a lower, so I could be in regular population. But every time you come back in, they always put you in segregation for like 2 weeks anyway. It can last up to a month of regular. Anybody who coming into the prison system will be put in segregation in the beginning, until they classify you. And however long that process takes is how long you're in there. And run all the tests, make sure no TB, all that stuff.
So
So
segregation, you're alone,
yeah, yeah, you're
on
alone,
your
but
own and alone.
yeah. And then you got people in cells next to you, and a lot of the mentally ill individuals are in those cells, either waiting to get transferred to the actual unit for individuals experiencing some mental illness. And so it was very, very, very chaotic,
And traumatizing.
and extremely traumatizing. You could only have one phone call. You could only go out into a little blocked area for. You're supposed to get an hour a day, but I don't think we got an hour a day. And then you're handcuffed to go to the shower, and handcuffed to come back from the shower. There were these little single cell stalls for a shower, and then handcuffed back, right? So yeah,
Well,
it was
I can't help but think about the role of trauma in the path that, the common denominator in the path that you've just described. Trauma early on, leading to behaviors, self-defeating types of behaviors, and being victimized. Trauma compounded the PTSD, natural reaction to trauma, and the behavior that caused you to end up going to prison because of behavior that was rooted in trauma, and prison being a traumatizing experience on top of all the other trauma. So far I'm hearing about a lot of trauma and not a lot of problem solving to deal with the trauma underlying this whole story.
Yeah. Yeah, thankfully, prior to going to prison, because I was a part of a church, they supported me 100%. So, because they came and visit when I was in jail, they came to visit. They wrote letters to the judge. These are pastors and lay people that were in a Sunday school class with me or volunteering with me on Sunday mornings, feeding breakfast to the community. Whatever it is that I was doing, these people came up for me and spoke up for me. And like I said, the pastor would visit me while I was still in the jail. Once I went off to prison, then I continued writing letters weekly. I got letters from him all the time, and he would update the other pastors and the congregation of how I was doing and what was going on with me. And so many of them would also send me cards and letters and of support and encouragement. So I was extremely supported from the outside. Family, my parents supported me. My sister, my brothers, my cousins. Like I had so much support while I was in prison, which not many people have.
No, that's true.
I was one of the lucky ones. So I didn't have much, but I did have people calling me and
People who
sharing.
knew you and who
Yeah,
believed in you
yeah,
as you,
right,
not who
exactly,
were defining you by your behavior
right,
when you were reacting
right,
to triggers
right,
that
yeah,
traumatized people can react to a variety of triggers in ways that can other people who don't recognize what's going on can just label them as, well, this person's just she's a wild lady, or
yeah,
she's disrespectful of police
yeah,
officers,
yes,
or this
yeah,
is someone who this or that, whatever it may
right,
be, when
hmm,
in fact the underlying problem goes unrecognized, or even if recognized, unaddressed.
right, right,
And prison was supposed to, what, solve that?
right, right,
Okay, that's just not a rational
mm,
approach to problem solving, which is what it's okay. There are other episodes where I talk about we need to shift from a punishment paradigm to a problem solving paradigm.
yeah, absolutely,
But anyway, again, it's your story that we want to hear,
yeah,
not my public safety policy preaching. Okay, go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah. So I had this support, and also decided that I remembered the last time that I went into prison angry, and that this time I was not going to do that. And so I decided that I was going to kind of experiment while I was in jail this time, instead of reacting and fighting and allowing that kind of rage to come out, that I was going to learn how to meditate. I was going to read the Bible, and I was not going to fight. I would, if I needed to protect myself, I would protect myself, but I wouldn't just be drawn into it from words. And so that's what I did. I really found a place of being able to meditate for an hour in the midst of this chaos, right? Screaming and yelling and banging and fighting and whatever was happening around you, right? Um, and that really what helped me through prison, but also helped me be able to be somebody new when I was released from prison. So also, the support of the pastor was extremely important. I remember when he came, and this is really foundational in what my ministry is now. When he came to see me, probably one of the first or second times, I was so upset and distraught that I was saying, I was doing all the right things. I was checking all the boxes. I was reading my Bible. I was doing, and he just said, Jennifer, God loves you for who you are right now, not who you're going to be tomorrow, not who you were yesterday, but you right now in this very moment. God loves you. And that was like mind blowing to me, right?
How did that
I,
make you feel when he said that?
yeah, just absolutely like seen. I finally felt seen for the first time, like that I didn't do anything like obviously I did something wrong that got me there, but I mean, like me trying to fix it meant that I couldn't fix it myself is really what came to my awareness at that time was that I had to just let go and try to um, get help to be able to heal from this. And
Now,
so that
to my thinking, based on my experience, God must have been speaking to you.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. God was definitely with me, and through that whole experience, God definitely walked with me while I was there, and was what gave me my calmness in the midst of some pretty terrifying moments of prison. Because prison is not, an easy space. So even when I did finally get out of segregation, the first space I was in was with 56 other women in a dorm um, with no air conditioning in the heat of summer of Texas. Um, so a lot of anger would come out of people there, being hot, being miserable, and being locked up all the time, not being able to get away from it. And so there's quite a bit of chaos. And then the prison I did the most time in, the unit I did the most time in, had 26 beds, and it was considered the worst of the lower charges of individuals. It was considered the worst unit on that campus, the one that I was in. So there was a lot of fighting. There was a lot of just stuff happening. Things I saw. Um, the only time that I actually had to put my hands on somebody was in that unit because they had my bunkmate pinned up against the wall and literally were going to kill him. And so I grabbed a hold of this person to pull them off him, which is a huge no-no, which really put my life in danger for the rest of my time there because I got into the middle of a fight that I was not supposed to be in the middle. But at that point, I was like, I'm not going to sit on my bunk and watch somebody be murdered. And again, I feel like it was that I had this protection from God. I didn't know it at that time, but I obviously I never got harmed. I didn't get put in segregation or any of that to protect me. But I survived. I never went outside again until I was released because you couldn't go outside. It was too dangerous for me, and I had people who would protect from the front of me and the behind me when we'd go to chow. So it was a very very, very difficult, challenging time from that point on. Um, but then I was released. I was denied parole, and then they messed up my out date, and so I was supposed to get out a month before, and instead I got out on June 4th, 2015. Um, 3 days after my daughter graduated high school. So I missed her high school graduation because they messed up my dates and would not correct them. Even though they agreed that they were wrong, they still went. By the time they could get me out to fix it, they got me out June 4th. So a few days after my daughter graduated high school.
Okay, so let's talk about when you got out. Okay, so
Yeah.
you're Was there anything within the system that you were in that would help prepare you for release? What to expect? Any sort of warm handoff to some support organization or anything of that sort? Tell us about that.
Mhm.
I mean,
So,
what did happen and what didn't happen?
yeah. So while I was in prison, I was a part of what helped me heal while I was in prison. I was part of what's called Bridges to Life, and it was originally founded by a man who his daughter was murdered, and so this was specifically for men that had violent crimes, so like murder or attempted murder or some sort of gun violence that led them to prison. But then it was opened up to all people. And it was a 3-month program where you would have individuals come in and give impact statements. So, how they were impacted by the crime that was committed, either toward them or because their family member was murdered or whatever happened, right? So they come in and they share that how the crime that you commit had caused this trickle down effect to, it's not just the individual that you harm, but the other people that are involved in that. So the program first makes you recognize the harm that you did, right? Take responsibility and accountability for your own actions, no matter what led you there, right? Account and understand how this could have affected not just the person, the individual that you committed the crime, but their family members. And so for me, I assaulted a police officer. So now a family member might be even more fearful of their loved one going out each time that they go to work because they have now been assaulted, right? No matter what the assault looked like, that they had actually been assaulted. And so thinking about how that affected if they had children or their spouse or their mother, their father, right? To really understand that what no matter what the reason was that you committed the crime, that there was still some other people are harmed by other than just the one individual. So to take
Police
accountability.
officers, it's a profession in which they experience a lot of trauma, a lot of traumatizing experiences. PTSD is common.
Yeah, my
And so you have victims encountering victims,
yes,
and that's not always a good outcome in that.
right. And actually, my brother-in-law, who has been as close to me as an actual brother, um, is retired police officer, and when he retired, he was actually retired chief of police. Um, I met him when I was 15 years old. He was dating my sister. They got married, and they've been married ever since. And this man has been 100% supportive of me all the way through this process that I've been in. When I say I have an amazing family, I have an amazing family, right?
I
And
think some
so
of the
I'm,
people who most understand what you're talking about are the seasoned,
yeah,
the more senior police officers, people
yeah,
with the heart and
yeah,
the head
yeah,
to get a bigger picture and to see, well, and ask themselves, what's going on here? What are we doing? How are we doing? I mean, is this really the best way to deal with things? And so if he was a chief of police, he probably had a problem solving sort of
yeah,
mindset, you know? And
yeah,
so anyway, I'm
yeah,
glad you had have
yeah,
somebody like that in your life
I do.
from the police side of things, the law enforcement side of things,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah, yeah. So I can
and
see
from
the
the church
opposite.
side. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, it's just the
so
opposite. It's
yeah,
not all. Uh,
all
and by
bad.
the way, there are defense attorneys who do a very good job.
No, I know. I do. I had some good defense attorneys, but just that one, like I said, was just doing the least that he could do because he was on the rotation to
Yeah. Well, that's what
take us.
happens when
So,
people are overworked and
yeah.
all that.
Right.
Okay, so tell us about day one. Day one,
So
the prison doors open up and you walk out.
yeah, I had my parents lived in North Carolina, so we made arrangements for a friend that lived in Austin to pick me up, and I was going to go stay with another friend that was part of a church in Austin for the first couple, I don't know, a month, or if I stayed 3 months. I really can't remember. It's really, which sometimes I'm thankful for that I can't remember. But day one, so they give you your clothes, or they let you pick out some clothes to put on your back. Um, you take what you want to take with you, right, out from your prison experience.
Any
Your
money?
shoes. I did not receive any money. No, I received no money. Mm-mm.
So
Uh,
basically, you walk out of prison with the clothes on your back, no money.
they'll give you a bus ticket if you need a bus ticket, but I had
Okay.
a person actually picking me up. So they will give you a bus ticket. Um, and yeah, everything you got to figure out on your own. So finding housing, like if you're being paroled out, that's all on you to write the letters to find a housing. There's nobody there to support you and help you do that. I came out on what was called mandatory release, where you have to still check in with a parole officer for, I think it was 3 months, or yeah, 6 months maybe. And I had to, yeah. And so then I was required to take some classes. And so that was, so my first day I get picked up and you have to check in within 24 hours of being released, with your officer. You have to go immediately straight there. Um, so you go from being locked up to sitting in another very traumatizing experience of feeling locked up again. You know, you're getting patted down. They're asking you to pee in a cup, and so it's pretty traumatic. You know, it's not. You're happy to be out, right? You're happy to have freedom, which we really don't. That's the whole point of fully
So
free.
you're not fully free yet.
You are not fully free. Um, Until this day, I'm still not fully free. I'm no longer on parole. I'm not on any type of thing, but and I'll explain that more in a minute. But yeah, so first day, you have to go check in, and then because of my charge, I had to take an anger management class with other people who are recently incarcerated who had just been released. Happened to be a room full of men who had done everything from murdering their wives and girlfriends. I was the only female in this class, and with multiple violent offenders, people that had previously. So them sharing the stories, not that I didn't see them as the the trauma was in the stories they were sharing, right? So we're sitting in a group to share the what we did or whatever, right? That brought us to this thing. And so not the individual. I didn't think that I wasn't traumatized by the individual or thinking I was fearful of the individual that was sitting next to me. So I don't mean it in that sense. I mean because they had to share their story of what they had done was then traumatizing to me because I'm a female sitting in this room listening, right? Should never have happened. They should have divided us. But I truly believe like that was a space for men should have been sharing men, women should be sharing women. But
Well,
unfortunately,
even then, again, this gets back to this theme that is developed over in this and virtually every other
mm-hmm,
episode of this program of trauma. And if a person is designing a program or a group of people are designing a program for people who they recognize that much of this criminality is rooted in large measure in trauma and the effects of trauma in people's lives, including in effects on the brain even,
mm-hmm,
and the way they perceive things, the way they behave. All right, the last thing you want to do is to put them into some therapy thing or something of that sort that is traumatizing,
yes, yes,
right? I mean,
yes, you would think,
to
right?
me, this
Yeah,
just, okay, this is
yeah,
like basic thinking. And yet, when people are not trauma aware,
yeah,
with all the best intentions, they can compound the trauma
yeah,
and compound the problem
right,
rather than solving the problem. They're just missing the point.
yes,
Okay, go
absolutely.
ahead.
So yeah, so I had to go through some of those, and then so I was arrested in Fort Worth, but I came out and went to Austin. Well, I was able to get permission to move back to Fort Worth because I wanted to reconnect with the church because we had already started talking about. I believed I had a call of ministry, but I hadn't. We were in trying to really discern what that looks like, right? To really hone in on what I was truly called to do. And so I moved back to Fort Worth. Was able to get a job that I worked at for a year, and then then I started working for the church after that first year. So I went to, but there was no programs that I came out, no reentry programs. I wasn't introduced to any reentry programs. I wasn't given any of that information. I don't know if it was because I didn't come out on parole, if that's why I wasn't aware of any of those, but I had none. I had none of those that information other than what was required by me to do um, by the state.
So sink or
And
swim.
yeah, yeah, pretty much. And then make sure you get a job, even though you can't get a job because you you have a felony. So I can't go back into the medical field. Um, And, yeah, and it's hard to get housing. It's hard. I was lucky to find a private landlord who gave me a chance and let me move in, even though I was just released from prison with a violent crime, right? Um,
So now you've just mentioned two things that are obstacles. The whole idea of sending someone to a correctional facility
mhm,
is that somehow they will come out corrected.
yeah,
Okay. So in the first place, there's this idea that if you put people who have committed criminal acts in the concentrated company of people who have committed criminal acts, that they're going to come out less inclined to commit criminal acts than when they went in.
yes,
Okay, that's not completely rational to start with.
yeah,
And then you expect them to now pursue a law-abiding life when there are, because of their criminal record, fewer opportunities for alternatives to crime, like employment, housing. In other words, if you're looking at this from an incentives perspective, it's no wonder we have a problem with recidivism. Because if you have fewer alternatives to crime when you get out of prison than when you went in,
yeah,
it's not surprising that people end up cycling back for one reason or another. And sometimes they cycle back for administrative reasons because they couldn't find a job
yes,
and because they couldn't find housing, so they send them back to prison.
right,
Okay,
exactly.
what's wrong with this picture?
Right, right.
Okay,
It's where I have opinion on that. I believe they want us there. Tracy in Texas has private prisons, so they're making money for every bed that's filled. So that's a whole nother thing. I was in one of those, so yeah, there's a lot of problems with mass incarceration and correcting it. But us coming out, even to this day, I have I had problems finding employment. So I uh, I was able to work at a job. How I made it again, how I got the job, I don't know because later on, when they found out that I had a felony, which I thought they knew because I thought they did the background check and I got hired anyway. They I had was told that I don't know how you got hired. Like, we don't hire people with felonies. I was like, well, I'm here. And so the manager is the one who found out, but she didn't go ahead and release me because obviously I was doing such a good job. And so she knew me more than just what was on that piece of paper. So as soon as somebody gives you a chance and look, don't use that and gets to know you first instead of just looking at what's on you, then typically you're going to find that they're human, first of all, and they deserve to have all the rights that everybody else has. They've already served their time, or I had already served my time. I shouldn't keep continuously being convicted over and over again, which continues to happen. So
what Marlon Chamberlain and Foley Free call permanent punishment.
it's permanent punishments continuously. Um, and when I went to apply for graduate school, so I went to graduate school, it's a seminary, that they had to have a special meeting interview with me because of my background, to determine whether or not they thought that I should be admitted into seminary. They had to have a panel that then discuss the interview that I had to make a decision on whether or not I should be interviewed. So it's a constant. I have to explain myself. I have to explain to them that I'm actually good enough, or smart enough, or I should be here, right? Um, that it
Well,
shouldn't
now,
matter.
that frankly, that's not irrational. I
Yeah,
mean,
no, I know, but
and
but
yet at the same time, hopefully the people who are asking the questions are doing it
yeah,
in
very,
the spirit of, okay, there's some explaining that needs to be done, but we're open to the
yeah,
explanation and knowing, and most importantly, you're not defined by what you have done in the past.
yeah,
How are you different today, and why are you different
right,
today?
right,
And fortunately, you're going into a a line of ministry
right.
in which hopefully the people have that sort of mindset. I would hope.
I've ran into some that do not, but so far, so
Well, you've got the collar on, so that's a
I
good
have a
sign.
collar on. I am here now, right? So I was allowed to attend, and in the United Methodist Church, you also have to what's called enter into candidacy. So you have to be approved for that. First, you have to be approved by your congregation. They have to say, yes, we believe that she is called to be whatever. So in the United Methodist Church, there's a local pastor, there is a deacon, and an elder. There's also some lay ministry stuff as well, but or ordination is a deacon or an elder. And an elder is what I believe that God has called me to. And so to continue to get affirmations that you're called to this. So your congregation first, or is the first step. Your pastor and your congregation that has a committee, they have to say, yes, you are, we believe you are called to be a pastor, to be an elder in the United Methodist Church. And then you go in front of another committee that then says, yes, we believe that you're called to be an elder in the United Methodist Church. Or at this point, the very beginning is a candidate for, so then you have to go to seminary for 3 years, get a master's of divinity, which I did, and continue each year to interview. But then during that process, there's a thing called being licensed. So you go to a United Methodist training for licensing as a pastor. So I am currently licensed as a pastor as I continue to go through the ordination process. And so I entered into seminary and the ordination process in 2016. I graduated seminary in 2019. During that process, there's a thing called clinical pastoral education, where you're to be a chaplain in a hospital setting. I applied, was accepted, but their human resources denied me because I had a felony on my background and said that I could not come into the program and be a resident. It's called being a resident at in a hospital as a chaplain, that I could not have that position. And so it continues to, even as a minister, as a, that you're still having options taken away from you. When I moved to Chicago and I was just trying to find a job, I won't say the name of the place, but it is a reentry. They do reentry. And I was hired to do this a position, but then human resources again came back and said, nope, she has this felony, and we're not going to hire her. I'm like, but you do reentry, so that's a whole nother thing. There's many great reentry programs here in Chicago, so there just happens to be one that has some issues. But anyway, so it continues to, even with me having now a master's degree, I have gone to try, when I first moved here in 2019 to get an apartment, I was denied because I have a felony. And I was denied multiple jobs. I applied for job after job after job after job and was denied over and over again because I have a felony. So thankfully, I have been able to be appointed as a pastor. So I was working as a resident with Urban Village Church, but it was an unpaid position because they no longer had the grant. So the reason I was trying to get other jobs is so I could do this training that I really believed that was necessary in order for me to continue to grow as a pastor. And so I accepted the position, even though I knew it wasn't paid, because I knew of the benefit that would come from the training, which has led me to where I am now. Being a part of that church and learning from them led me to where I am now. But I have continued to see, trying to get. Now I live in what's called a parsonage. So the church is the church owns the house or the apartment, and so they know I have a felony, and so I'm allowed to live here, right? Because I work here. But I was just appointed to this new church, Holy Covenant, March 1st. And so this is a brand new experience. But I've been, like I said, I've been a local pastor since 2016, and I continue to work through the process of ordination. And hopefully in the next 2 years, I'll finally be ordained. But I have a little bit more interviews and work to do.
Well, God bless you in your
yeah,
work
thank you.
and for the work that you're doing
Thank
and
you.
have the desire to do. Now, looking back, are there any lessons that you've learned that might be beneficial to people who may be listening to help them avoid going to prison, or if they've gone to prison, that would help them avoid looping back to prison? Lessons learned.
Yeah. I think the support that you have is extremely important in being able to survive being in prison, being out of prison, because it's hard. It's hard. If you don't have support, I've been very lucky. And here in Chicago, there is a lot of support. There's lots of programs that connect with you immediately as you get out of prison. And that's People's Liberty Project. I found them when I moved here in 2019, and how I wish they would have had a program like that in any of the other states that I lived in. These are all individuals who were previously incarcerated, and it's basically a support group that we meet once a month, and we are able to share our stories. So it's people who were recently released, maybe 2 days before, and people who were released 21 years ago. And so we're all part of this group that help each other to find resources, to encourage, to have someone to come talk to, so they don't go back to prison, right? So when it feels people are homeless because they can't find housing, to be able to, tell them of the different laws that landlords are not allowed to tell us we can't live there any longer because we have a felony in Chicago, right? You're not allowed. So, but does everybody follow that? No. So, but we're there to help, to say, these are your rights. And then we also all do legislative work now. So trying to change these laws that keep us from being successful. So advice is to find support. And I know it's hard, but to find the right people in your life to help guide you. And when you have get a therapist. Oh my gosh, I know it's hard. There's mental health programs that you can get a therapist for free. If you don't have a job, you don't have insurance, you can apply for state insurance, Medicaid. It is hard to find. It takes a little bit of a process to get a therapist, but I 100% recommend everyone have a therapist, because it's that person that you can have those conversations with, right? Like you can say whatever it is that you're feeling, and get it off your chest, and then have somebody who's there to support you. So therapy, 100%. I wish I would have had therapy prior to prison. That probably might have helped me stay out of prison.
Well, one of the things, just in that regard,
Yeah.
that I used to be the director of public safety policy in the Illinois governor's office.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I was aware of in that position were studies that were being done about what works and what doesn't work,
Yeah.
and helping people avoid recidivism. In other words, that's the negative side. Of it. More positive thing is successfully reenter community and family life. And repeatedly, the most cost-effective thing that prisons could deliver was cognitive behavioral therapy.
Yes.
Essentially, people have to get their head straight before they can get their life straight.
Yeah.
And that doesn't just happen because some magic switch turned on. If somebody makes a decision, I'm going to get my life straight. It takes help.
Yeah.
And it takes some structure and ongoing support.
Yeah.
So cognitive behavioral therapy,
Right.
or what Ready Chicago calls cognitive behavioral intervention.
Right. Yeah. Finding healing for the trauma that you have experienced is extremely necessary. The trauma that you experienced while you're in prison, to have places to go, to have those conversations with people that understand, because our family members, they can support us, but they don't really understand what it really was like to be sitting behind those walls, and the experiences that we have.
Isn't the parallel between that, when we talk about trauma, and people who are returning from combat experiences, who they have supportive, loving families, they have a lot of support in the community, but having someone who understands, that they can share with, that and professional help that can help them deal with the traumas that they've experienced. Okay, that's something that even loving, supporting friends and family can't offer. So if you're getting out of prison, if a person was getting out of prison in the Chicago area today, where would you recommend that they go to get connected, to help navigate resources?
Well, it's Precious Blood. Precious Blood Reentry Services is where we have People's Liberty Project. We meet monthly, once a month. We're on. We do Zoom right now, but we'll continue to do Zoom for people who live outside of the Chicago area. So it's for any individual who's ever been impacted by the justice system, and it can even be it was a family member, right? But specifically, it's more for individuals who have been previously incarcerated that are looking for support. So People's Liberty Project is, I think, one of the most important groups that we have here in Illinois, in Chicago. And we have people from all over the state that join us monthly. And then we do, like I said, we join in like Fully Free campaign. I think it's important that you find something that you're passionate about.
What message do you have for people like me who have not experienced what it's like to go to prison, get out of prison, and face the obstacles to successfully re-entering the community? What message do you have to the rest of us, the rest of the community, that the people who are in the impacted community, the people impacted by imprisonment, want everyone else to know and understand?
That individuals who have been sentenced to prison or jail, that they did their sentence. If we have been released from prison, we did our sentence. We shouldn't have to continue to be marginalized and oppressed because of something that we have already paid the cost for. We have already paid back to society by whatever we were sentenced to, right? Whether it was sentenced to 2 years or 20 years, that we have already done that sentence, and that we should not be sentenced to life. And we are sentenced to life. Outside of the walls, we are still not free. We continue to have to face barrier after barrier. If you have a drug charge, you cannot get federal grants to go to school. How do you better yourself? You can't get certain jobs. There's still, I still cannot work in a hospital. I am a licensed pastor now, and I could still not work in a hospital because I have a felony. There are other areas in Illinois alone that we are not able to work or get education or even live in certain areas, right? There are apartments and housing that is still told that we can't live there. There's many states that say that you can't vote. You have no right to vote if you have a felony, or while you're in prison, you can't vote, that you no longer have a voice. And I just think that it's important that we know, no matter what the crime was, that these people, we are still human. We are still live here, and we have every right to, as that everybody else has, to be successful in life, to succeed in life, right? And whatever that looks like, whatever those dreams are, we should still be offered those same things. We did our time. Our time is done. We should not have to continue to be harmed by the system.
Thank you for that message. An observation. It's interesting that so many of the people who I have talked to as guests on this program have found healing in getting involved in helping others who are traveling the same path. And here you are devoting yourself completely, not just to that, but helping others who, along their spiritual paths, and the struggles that they have in dealing with life as a pastor. And I say again, God bless you in your work and for your work. Thank you, Pastor Jennifer Stevens, for being on this program.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for allowing our voices to be heard. It's so important.
This is Justice Voices, stories that need to be told, voices that need to be heard.